There we go. We're live.
Okay, everybody, we're live again for Tech Talk. I've got a pretty bad echo. That's okay. So today I'm really excited. We've got our API Evangelist Alex Gaber from San Francisco. He was just at the AT&T hackathon, represented Layer 7, so he's got lots of things to talk about. And we're going to talk about developer engagement, building a developer ecosystem around your open API, through different methods like hackathons and contests and stuff. And we've got these cool new Layer 7 t-shirts. Here's one there, the code some of us are wearing. This one, we've got Layer 7 much cooler than the first. Than the first 6. We've got Where's Waddle? And we've got Rest Easy with Layer 7. So at the end of the talk, Alex will ask a question. And if you know the answer, just tweet it to our hashtag #Layer7Live. And we'll pick a winner at random. And you'll get yourself a cool new Layer 7 t-shirt. So at this point, Alex, if you wouldn't mind just sort of introducing yourself and the topic, and we'll start taking questions as soon as people start chatting them in. So don't forget, you can go through Facebook. If you're at the live stream /Layer7Live, you can just check in and chat. You can tweet us at #Layer7Live. Also, you can just simply email them. If you don't have time to sit around and wait for your question to be answered, you can just simply email them to techtalk@layer7.com. So, Alex, from San Francisco.
Good morning. Morning. Thank you, Stephen.
You're welcome.
So welcome, everyone, and excited here to discuss lots of different aspects here of growing a developer ecosystem. Everything from getting your API launched and out there to beyond that, how do you create a lasting ecosystem with developers and building relationships, building an ecosystem where developers are making money off your platform so they can build an actual business off of it, whether it's for that reason or for existing customers to integrate better with your platform through an API that you expose to your web-based system. Want to talk about the different approaches out there, all the way from doing hackathons to doing online developer contests, such as we've seen that go long-term. Want to kind of talk about how effective those can be. Are they a weekend hackathon and then the app gets scrapped and it's just built and done and left behind, or is this something long-term? And how do you build those lasting relationships with those developers and really engage with the community? And also want to talk about really the technical aspects of it. How do you make it easy for new partners, new developers to start using your API, whether it's through an API Explorer console or through really good sample apps that you build and provide to the community. But what are those tools? Which one of those tools is the most effective, and how do you get those tools to the developers and get them exposed? So really, that's kind of the goal today, is to talk about how do you engage, how do you build that ecosystem, what does make a good strategy, and what will lead to the success that your company and your API are really looking for. So that's the quick introduction here.
How was the hackathon this last weekend? Can you just sort of talk about that for a second?
Sure. So Layer 7, we the last hackathon we went to is actually hosted by AT&T and Full Contact. Both AT&T and Full Contact are there to really build mobile app ecosystems, not just even for their own platform. Their real goals here are to provide their APIs for developers to integrate into their larger applications. One aspect is that they are humble. They know that maybe their API maybe just be a piece of the bigger picture to a developer. So the hackathon this past weekend was hosted in Denver. So we had a lot of people from the Denver developer community as well as Boulder. A lot of developers came down from Boulder. It was hosted at the Uncubed Workspace in Denver. It was a great venue for a hackathon. Lots of desks, chairs, monitors to hook into, power strips, and solid Wi-Fi that worked well, which is always very important. And then, of course, lots of good food and lots of prizes. But the apps that were built there were actually really impressive. You know, some people say, like, oh, you have to do a hackathon, you have to do it in Silicon Valley to get the good talent. That's where all the talented developers are. But not at all. As I've traveled to these different cities for hackathons, there's amazing developers with various expertise all over the world. And that's really what is important with these hackathons, is to tap into that knowledge that exists in these different locations, and get involved with the community. So that the hackathon was really exciting. There's a lot of really cool apps. The winner of that hackathon was called Peak Contact, which was really good for full contact. Full contact provides an API that lets you search and query based on a Twitter name or an email address, and then they return back with full social profiles. So you can send in a Twitter name, and it'll send back to you that person's the link to their LinkedIn profile, their email address, the link to their Facebook profile, their Google Plus profile, their Flickr profile, Vimeo. It comes back with all social network profiles, so then you can really get that data and get the full, the full contact or full profile of that user. So that was the winner of that hackathon, and their app's already in the App Store. So it shows you that in just a weekend, a new app can be built. They're charging $1 per download of it, and it really helps to build that full contact ecosystem.
What's the app called? Sorry?
The app is called Contact Peak. Peak is spelled P-E-E-K, based on, and kind of the icon and logo is based after the peaks of the Rocky Mountain Range there in Colorado. But also to give you a peek or an insight into who that contact is. In their demo example, they used Brad Feld, who's a local venture capitalist there. And so he said, I have a meeting with him tomorrow. I want to get all the info about Brad Feld, so I do my homework before I get there. And they had a very slick interface. It was a very user-friendly app to get that info and dive deep and learn about Brad and his interests, so that you can have a better conversation with him. Meet with him.
Great. Look, it looks like we've got our first question. So I've chatted it into you. So if you don't get everything I read, then you can just have a quick look. But Jean-Luc asks, what are the best practices for building a trustworthy relationship between developers and a company API? Giving them direct access to the API, building a middleware that will link directly to the company API. The aim is to extend the scope of a particular service integration.
Yeah.
So what are the best practices in general?
Right. So that's a great question. And so obviously, there's lots of different, as a platform, you're going to have a large set of APIs. And, right now today, you may only offer API access to an authorized partner. You may have to go through a contract process to negotiate access, or it may be very secure. And so we've seen a lot of these middleware API platforms in the market that basically let you open up your API in a secure, safe, and scalable way, because you want to have control for all of those three aspects of it. And so we've seen several middleware companies, one of which is Layer 7, but there's several others out there that provide various different solutions as a middleware effectively for your APIs to be exposed out publicly. And then that gives you basically, it's effectively a firewall or a gateway to manage the access into your APIs. But then it's important to provide that developer portal, provide documentation and a forum, and an API key that authorizes each API call that comes through, and manage through that middleware layer to protect your back-end servers. And then I see here you asked that question. Okay, no, that's the same question there, Steven. So I think that answers it. That was from Jean-Luc.
Okay. So yep. Jean-Luc, if you're on the line, he did email this question, so he may or may not be in here. So if you're online and there's a follow-up bit to the question, or if Alex didn't touch on something that you're hoping to hear, then just email us back or chat in or tweet it with hashtag Layer7Live. So, and I see there's a few more people have joined us and didn't catch the beginning. So I just want to make sure that, just recap that we're talking with Alex Gaber, our API evangelist, about building a developer ecosystem around an open API. And so make sure if you have any questions, you can chat them through the stream, the red button, check in and chat. You can always email them to us at techtalk@layer7.com, and you can tweet them to hashtag Layer7Live. So we'll get to our next question. It's around Twitter. They're changing their agreements a lot in a kind of unpredictable way. What we want to build. So what do you think about the Twitter API kind of arbitrarily including, excluding people?
Right. So that brings up an interesting point. I hear about whenever there's a new startup in Silicon Valley or a new business that's basing a lot of their company and their platform on top of another API. Whether it's in this case with Twitter, maybe something like Twitter clients, with StockTwit or Hootsuite, these kinds of platforms. It's from the as an example, the investor may see that as very risky because they're dependent upon and reliant upon that API platform. And we're starting to see a large backlash coming to Twitter based on these changing levels of access they're providing. Obviously, they've got a very valuable platform, and they need to control it and monetize it the best they can. But as an API publisher, one rule of thumb is that you need to really be transparent and straightforward and honest to the developer community. Even though you're just putting out a developer portal and saying here it is, and you may never see face-to-face these developers. They're real people, and they have real feelings and emotions behind these things, and they're building real businesses on top of your API. And when you change the terms of use and the access levels that you're providing, that's going to cause a lot of ripples into the community. And beyond just developers, the big partners, it'll lead to, in the future, aspects as well, that in the future developers will say, well, shoot, if I use Twitter, that adds risk here. They may churn on me in the future. And so as a publisher, you need to kind of start out in the beginning, whether it's maybe start a little slower and be more cautious, so that you don't you don't ever overpromise and underdeliver in the future. So it's really important there to we see here with Twitter that they're causing kind of a lot of anger in the developer community and saying that they don't build these things, don't do this. Whereas you look at someone like Twilio that says, hey, no matter what, we are just going to provide this API. We're never going to go compete against our community. So you don't have to worry about that. So developers see an API like Twilio as much more, they can rely upon it and feel confident building on it and know that they won't get shut off later in the future. Whereas you see what Twitter's doing, that's not good. So as other APIs are being launched, it's very important to make sure that you provide very clear, transparent terms of service, and that you don't change those and really affect the developers over time.
So in the case of Twitter, they stopped with LinkedIn, and then I think Instagram, you couldn't find your Twitter friends or whatever. Why are they doing that? What's happening, do you think? Are these strategic things like different, Facebook owns Instagram, owns, things like that, or is it pure developer, something's wrong with the API or whatever, they don't?
Well, so the thing is, you look at, APIs have really become business development 2.0. They're the new way of a handshake and cutting a business deal. These different, these different business deals they cut, they may choose to renegotiate them in the future and say, well, now, we 2 years ago it made sense for us to partner with LinkedIn and provide them the full fire hose and let them get access to all tweets easily and readily and stream it onto their site. But now, their strategic direction has changed, and they realize they need to provide a more of a walled garden, and protect their content that their users put onto their platform, and not be as open and not be as sharing. and that's a strategic shift for them as a company. When they make these decisions, you got to figure that they're weighing out the pros and cons. They've got to know that when they do these things, that it's going to cause ripples in the developer community beyond just that one partnership that they are now throttling down and limiting, say with LinkedIn. But these, everyone hears about that, talks about it, and says, what if someday I'm the next LinkedIn, and Twitter does that to me?
Right.
That's a big problem. And so, you've got to think that they're weighing that these decisions carefully and making them based on what they figure is their long-term strategic goals to be in line with. But so we may say, oh, that decision seems crazy. Why would they ever do that? But you've got to, they're very smart people, and they've got to have figured that, okay, we'll deal with the backlash initially, but in the future, then it'll work itself out, and our platform will be stronger, and we'll retain the value better for ourselves.
Right. Great answer.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry, the sound dropped out for a second there. I was just listening. I thought maybe your mic went off. Okay, so another question around motivating developers, I guess, in hackathons. Do prizes really motivate developers? Shouldn't the real opportunity of building a sustainable integration with our API be enough?
Right. Well, so it definitely depends on who you are as an API provider and what stage you're at, and how desirable are your APIs, and how competitive is that space for your API. If you go search programmable web and you're offering a voice API like Twilio and 50 different ones come up, then it's a highly competitive space. It's more, there's more players at the party, and to get out there, to get your API in the hands of developers, prizes can make sense. There's as at a hackathon, for example, you'll see prizes given out. $500 prize for best use of our API. And let's use voice. You're another voice platform. You're not Twilio. You're a startup, and you're slightly different than Twilio. Maybe you provide a better voice protocol than SIP, and there's the VoIP quality is better. And you're trying to promote that API. How do you get out there? You go to a hackathon. There's 300 developers. Let's say, of those, there's 50, 60 teams, and you get 20 of the teams that actually signed up and used your API and tried it. They built it, and so then they're all vying for that $500 prize. So you've got 60, 70 more developers who have played with your API. They've got it working. They've used it, and only one of those teams will win it. But then 1 week down the road, a month, 3 months down the road, they're back at their day job, and they need to integrate voice in their application. They say, well, I actually had practice using that one API. I built it at a hackathon. So that's kind of one use case example where a prize drives that integration, future integration that really does make sense for your business. What I've kind of seen at the hackathons is over the last few years is the prizes definitely vary, and again, it always kind of there's the nuances of each different API platform and what makes sense. There's been $100,000 prize for an online contest that runs 6 months. Then there's the $100 gift card prize as well. I think it seems, as a general rule, the more confident an API platform is in itself, the lower the prize they'll need to offer to get people using it. I think I've seen Twilio, as an example, offer much smaller prizes now because they've got such a thriving ecosystem. They don't need to. Because, prizes are a little bit, they're not, it's not a long-term business. It's not a job. And it's a quick little money thing, and it's kind of a token amount just to say good job. And yes, that's a good question to ask is, why aren't these really long term? So that's kind of then that kind of leads into how you've architected the business of your API for access to it. Is it something that developers can trust over the long term and build upon? And then creating those revenue opportunities for developers beyond just that initial app or hack they put together.
Right, because I guess there's two sides, right? There's the publisher, and they're motivated by creating a new kind of business opportunity through their API, but also the developer wants to develop an app that he or she, I guess, could eventually turn into some sort of a business.
Right.
So each one needs to be equally motivated.
Exactly. And there's different types of API business models. Some are direct revenue, some are indirect revenue. So in like Twilla's example, a developer is paying a penny per text message they put through the platform.
Okay.
But say in the example of a media publisher or a retailer that's putting out their API of their product list, or a media publisher is all their news articles, they're really looking for content syndication and or ad revenue through their API, through their content being integrated. So again, for different types of APIs, the different long-term business models will apply here for what makes most sense.
Okay. And then how do you segment your developer ecosystem?
Yeah. So that's an interesting question. Is typically it'll depend on, of course, the type of API, but typically the segmentation that I've seen done from the API platform side, looking at their developer ecosystem, is they'll look at internal API consumption as kind of the tier one. Then they'll see kind of next tier down is close partners as well. So this may be existing business partners or big clients that are integrating their API. And then the third segment would be the long tail or third-party developers for the API. And so I've seen APIs launched purely as internal APIs. In some big companies run internal hackathons only, and it's purely this is for our own employees.
Right.
And then obviously on the other side, like where I was last weekend at the AT&T hackathon and Full Contact, they're going after long tail developers, app developers, integrating their apps. So that's the basic segmentation I've seen. But again, that can kind of differ based on different types of APIs and industries that they're in.
Right. Okay. Just want to remind everybody too that you can tweet your questions to #Layer7Live. You can always email them. Like I said, if you can't sit here and listen for the whole 45 minutes, it's just techtalk@layer7.com. Or you can, if you're at the live stream or on our Facebook, check in and chat. And I see there's a few people checked in. But Alex is here to answer your questions, so don't be shy. And then don't forget, in case you missed it off the top, we've got all these brand new Layer 7 t-shirts. Here's an example of one again. This is the Where's Waddle. So we'll have a question at the end related to APIs and hackathons, and you answer the question through email or tweet it with the hashtag, and we'll pick a winner at the end, and you'll get a cool new Layer 7 shirt. We'll send it out to you. So another question we've got here is, what has better ROI? An important question, a hackathon or an online developer contest? In your experience, what has better ROI?
Yeah, I've seen all types, and obviously I think we're in the early days of this, and really when you ask that kind of question, I think you're going after more long tail and or close partners, and building out your API is often a marketing cost. The API is a new business tool, a new revenue stream. For some companies, the API is a loss leader. It's a way to kind of get people onto your platform initially and integrating with you. So with hackathons, they're quicker and they're easier mostly. We see a lot of these kind of aggregate hackathons now, where it's not just one API platform, maybe 10, 20 different APIs are coming together. Maybe someone like Layer 7's at the hackathon, where we're bringing lots of APIs to the table. And so as an API platform, do you want to invest in a hackathon or run an online contest? which we're working with our partners to run these longer-term contests where some call them more developer challenges. Typically hackathon, and the results are going to be different based on what you do. With a hackathon, you're typically going to see more quick point solutions that are solving one niche problem or one smaller issue, and they build that kind of the approach of the wheel and the car, right? So you're going to start, you'll build just the wheel today and build the wheel really well, and then you'll build the car around it later on. Whereas an online developer contest, you'll see a lot more sophisticated and advanced submissions. Often the online developer contest, you'll provide a lot larger bounty or prize amount for the first prize. We've seen big companies do these like Netflix, TD Ameritrade did one recently. Samsung has a big one going right now where they're providing bigger amounts of money, bigger opportunities. I've even seen ways of recruiters doing online contests and saying apply through the API.
Right.
Show us how to use our platform. That's then why we'd want to hire you. And so there's varying ways to measure ROI, and that's kind of what there's many different companies out there that are helping API publishers do that through various kind of consulting programs to run these hackathons, run developer challenges, and then deciding what are the metrics for success.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of the important thing here is deciding what are the goals for this event. In the case where I was last weekend, and I'd say most hackathons I go to, the API platforms they're really looking to build community and to build goodwill with developers. They know that this hackathon this weekend, it may result in a quick little app built for an iPhone app or an Android app, but that's not the long-term goal. And then then they go again. The developer goes back to their day job 3 months later, and they say, "Oh yeah, I know a platform, an API that does that. Let me pull it in here." And suddenly your ROI on that hackathon goes from a loss to a huge success because you onboard a new partner. So just the way companies measure their marketing ROI for attending conferences, getting booths at events, and running the exclusive renting out the suite at the hotel and hosting an evening event. Those kinds of activities all have different measurable ROI,
Right.
and the results will be different. So developer challenges, you'll probably get more sophisticated, real applications and integrations built on your API. Hackathon, it's really more kind of an exposure. Maybe if you equate these to online advertisements, a hackathon may be more of a banner ad, and the online developer challenge may be a cost per click or cost per action.
Right.
To create that metaphor. Okay.
And how important are developer tools such as API Explorer?
Okay. So yeah, that brings up another kind of another interesting topic about how do you help these developers and get your API explained out there easily. Definitely in the earlier days, I'd see APIs that are launched and they provide very little help to the developers, and just kind of assume the developer is an expert with curl and can easily integrate them, or they're using a tool like HTTP Scoop and watching the headers go through as they can replay the API passing through and debug things that way. What I've seen more and more is these really good API consoles and API explorers being provided within the platforms and integrated in. There's some vendors out there that simply provide these for free, and you can bolt them onto your API as is, and it's just an open source tool they provide out there that'll automatically just show any new parameters or methods that you launch on your API. These tools will then just put that into the drop-down menu, and developers can easily run those calls, test them, change the parameter values, see the responses, and map those accordingly in their application. and see that JSON payload and easily parse it that way. And that's becoming more and more important, I think, especially in hackathon environments where you need to be able to quickly understand what the API does, play with it, understand how the response body looks and the structure of it, to integrate your application really quickly, not have any surprises. And these, again, more and more important, especially for APIs that require different forms of more stringent authentication, even especially OAuth. Putting that into your in an API console, showing exactly how it works, will definitely just spread cast a wider net for the amount of developers who will be able to consume your API.
Yeah.
The more difficult it is to understand how the API works, the fewer developers, it raises the bar for the developers' knowledge to be able to use it, and you'll just access a smaller market of developers. So the console, the Explorer, is extremely important, and showing exactly how the call is processed and what happened and the headers in the interface of your developer portal or partner portal is extremely important, and it's pretty much become an expectation for developers now, and it was not really a year ago. But now to be able to get in there, play with the API in an Explorer that's built into the portal. They don't have to go use any other tools themselves, like a REST console or SOAP UI to play with the API. It's all in there for them, so they can figure it out quickly.
Great. And so another question: what kinds of freemium models to charging for our API make sense? So I guess that's the path towards monetization. Will developers be willing to pay for a premium access?
Right. Yes. So even back to, say, the Twitter example, they offer basically different levels of access. We heard years ago, I think a couple years ago, when Google and Microsoft wanted access to the fire hose of Twitter. So Twitter results could be searched basically real time through Bing or through Google. And I think Google and Microsoft both paid $10–20 million a year to get that level of access. And so no doubt the business of APIs and the different business models. I think programmable web, John Musser has kind of put out reports on the various different business models of APIs, and some are charging directly, some are indirect. There's if it's let's say it's a newspaper company, they're putting out content articles, but also through the API, when you pull in their API, you're also getting an advertisement, but then they split that revenue with you. I think Guardian UK does that as an example. And so that's an ad revenue share through the API. And then then we just have more like Twitter, like Full Contact, for example, this weekend, where they hey, for the first 300 API calls you make per month, that's free. And then it scales up based on volume, and your price goes down for the volume of API calls you're making. Full Contact and Quarterly are both good examples where they're charging kind of per call because they're providing basically access to their database. And I've also seen certain APIs that are running algorithms that are processing data, where their server costs are quite expensive. One example is a startup out in New York called Percolate, where they're basically going to percolate or filter based on very mathematical algorithms to figure out which content is the most valuable and most interesting for content brands that are publishing, retweeting things and liking things. They need to figure out what are the most valuable. So with Percolate, their API call costs them quite a bit of money because their CPU cycles spin up and they have to run those each API request. So they will charge a lot more because they're also then, that's how they're effectively licensing the algorithm that they've built is through their API. Right. And they charge more. But it's definitely important. Always, you've got to offer some sort of free version to let developers get started. The first, immediate churn off for APIs, and what I've seen kind of causes APIs of a fail to launch, is that they charge for immediate access, or they want your credit card right away, or then that's definitely not going to help your API get launched and take off. You need to offer a very, very, can be extremely limited, just very, very basic access, but you need to give developers that taste, that first bite to get them hooked on your API and get them using it and integrating it, so that then they'll pay for for higher levels of access later.
Right. That makes sense.
Yep.
For sure. And again, just a quick reminder, we're sort of getting towards the end. We're probably going to give away the shirt pretty quick. We've got another question or two. And like I said, just we're coming towards the end. So if you do have any questions that we didn't touch on, chat them in real quick or tweet them for us. And Alex is still here for a few more minutes to answer them for you. Here's a question about paying. For our platform, our paying customers use our API to create integrations with their other IT. Does that change our approach?
Yeah, sure. Like that would kind of that would kind of be like the example of any SaaS platform, someone like Salesforce.com, where they offer their API, but to use that API, you'd have to already be a paying customer of their API. So it's definitely a different approach. That would kind of be more of when we talked about the segmenting your developer ecosystem, that would be the middle one there, that the partners or customers that, it's not just it's not necessarily a freemium model. I definitely still recommend you at least put out the documentation for your API and explain what it is and make that public. So as new customers are evaluating you versus competitors, they're going to want to see your API and know how relatively easy it would be to integrate with you. And that's kind of the different, it's definitely a different approach, but it's still just equally as important. You're not necessarily going to be participating in hackathons for this. You're not looking at long tail here at all. It's entirely for close partners and/or internal integrations as well. Companies like Twitter run their entire company off of their API, and so that could be kind of another thing here where your API is provided purely for internal consumption and close partner consumption of the APIs. So then you may never charge for your API at all. It's something you just simply have to provide as part of the complete package that your customers are paying for. So I call that more kind of indirect revenue through your API.
Yeah.
Where it's not something you as a company can measure, say, oh, we launched our API and this is, driving us this much revenue. Really look at the API as something that will automate your partner relationships for your customers. It'll give your customers more value out of your platform. Pretty much all companies that launch these days as a SaaS platform are offering an API. I do occasionally run across companies that don't have APIs because their vision is more of a closed architecture. But I think over time we'll see that happen less, if ever, less and less, if at all. It's just simply become a necessity to offer that API to your customers. And I have even seen some SaaS platforms that do. They offer Salesforce offers it for free, but as an example, if they said, well, here's our SaaS platform, and if you want to build, do custom integrations, you have to pay for the API access as a separate add-on module when they're selling these to enterprises. So I have seen that business model as well, because they obviously then feel like they have to provide support, and it may end up in a lot more traffic. And so it's again, it's based on the business model of each company, and you have to be careful. You don't just still have to be careful there too. You don't just say, hey, enterprise customers of ours, here's our platform, and sure, yeah, we offer our API for free. But then suddenly one of your existing customers builds some integration where they're hammering the API, and you realize your server costs and bandwidth costs are going way up for that, and that customer suddenly becomes non-profitable to you. So you have to be careful of that as well, and just be think of that up front and be explicit with the usage terms for your existing customers, so that they understand that what access level they get and how much they can consume of the API what they can do through it. And then, there's, also you want to make sure that you, as a SaaS platform, will maintain what your user experience is. If your customers start pulling more and more of the user interaction out of your current interface, your stock interface that you provide, and they're pulling it more into their other IT systems, activities that are done in other systems that then just trigger APIs in, that may lose value for you as a SaaS platform provider. You may become less sticky in that enterprise over time, where your customers feel like they can now, they don't need you as much. You just become a database to them. You have to be, careful of that too. So it's a delicate dance there of how much you want to provide and what level. But it's definitely a necessity to provide it, but just do it in the right way.
Great.
Okay.
So I think maybe it's time to give away the T-shirt.
Okay.
Here, I'm just going to show them quickly again. We've got it's the one Jose's wearing.
Yeah.
Layer 7, way cooler than the first 6. We've got our Rest Easy with Layer 7. We've got this cool Waddle shirt. Where's Waddle? And we've got a final kind of a code heavy one, which shows what we do. So Alex, do you have a question?
Yeah, I think one thing I was just going to kind of say is I think maybe one interesting question that we could ask is what is the most popular API on the web? Based on some of the leading directories, probably, such as Programmable Web. Let's throw out that question: is who's number one right now in the API space as far as open APIs go? Who does the most traffic and has the most mashups built on them?
Good question. So you can email your answer to techtalk@layer7.com, or you can tweet it with hashtag layer7live, and then we'll just pick a winner at random. So thanks very much, Alex. I forgot to mention this is Jose too. Thanks, Jose, making sure that the sound and the video is good.
Yeah.
But yeah, thanks again, Alex. Great talk. Really appreciate it. And it'll be up online in a few hours. We download it and then upload it to YouTube, and we'll share it that way. You'll be able to see it on our Facebook page. We'll tweet it. So if there's some questions or answers that were really interesting to you, you can go back and watch it, and it'll be a great video for you to come back to watch. So thanks everybody who joined us. We'll have another Tech Talk in 2 weeks on September 4th. So hopefully you can come back and join us again. Thanks, Alex.
Okay. Thanks, Stephen. Thanks, Jose. Thanks, everybody.